Hello dear participants. Now let's skip to the module 4.2, Climate and Environmental Projects in Public Procurement, the role of Contract Supervisor in identifying corruption risks. Let's start with the reporting template. This webinar is designed to guide you through the monitoring process in a clear and structured way. It follows the same logic as the report for monitoring projects. The reporting template is divided into 3 steps. Step 1 is the desk analysis. This is where you review the contract information and spot potential corruption risks. Step 2 focuses on contract implementation, checking whether the project is being carried out as promised on the ground. And step 3 looks at results and impact, evaluating whether the outcomes match the objectives and serve the public interest. During this part, we'll focus on the substantive role of the contract supervisor, looking at how they ensure projects are implemented as planned, that environmental requirements are respected, and that corruption risks are spotted early. We'll also talk about a special kind of supervisor, the environmental supervisor, whose job is to look closely at how construction works are carried out, how natural resources are managed, and whether measures to protect biodiversity and the environment are properly applied. This oversight is essential to make sure that projects not only meet contractual obligations, but also deliver the expected environmental performance. So, actually, who is this guy in the Superman's outfit? Let's start by looking at one special role in project implementation, the contract supervisor. So, who is this person? What do they do? And why we are talking about them now? The contract supervisor is basically the watchdog of the project. Their job is to keep an eye on everything happening at the construction site. They don't just observe, they prepare reports describing what's going on, what has been completed, and how the work was carried out. These reports are more than just paperwork. They're a valuable source of information about whether the contract is being implemented properly. They can also reveal red flags, warning signs that something might be wrong, including possible corruption schemes. And here's an important point. Sometimes the contract itself says that supervision must be in place. If you go to the site and find that no supervisor is actually there, there's a major red flag. It suggests that oversight is missing, which opens the door to risks like poor quality work, misuse of funds, or even fraud. In climate and environmental projects, a contract supervisor is usually required to oversee implementation. If the supervisor's actions are not documented, communication is difficult, and there are no visible traces of oversight, this raises a red flag. Lack of proper supervision records may indicate weak accountability, poor transparency, or even potential irregularities in contract execution. Environmental and climate projects often involve special permits, technical standards, and community impacts. Missing supervisors, vague reports, or phantom subcontractors don't just waste money, they can mean flood defenses fail, forests aren't replanted, or renewable energy systems don't meet safety standards. Spotting these red flags early helps protect both public funds and the environment. So, what is exactly a role of contract supervisor? Environmental protection. One of the big jobs in contract supervision is keeping an eye on the environment. That means regularly inspecting the construction site, making sure watercourses don't get clogged up with sludge, keeping pollution to a minimum, and checking that machinery isn't leaking oil or creating too much dust. Design compliance. Supervisors also need to make sure the construction work matches the design. If something doesn't fit or needs adjusting, they work with the project designer to agree on alternative solutions. The designer has the final say, but the supervisor makes sure everything stays on track. Waste management. Another responsibility is dealing with waste. Supervisors coordinate and check that the team is following the waste management plan and all the required documentation is in place. Training and documentation. Supervisors train employees on how to protect the environment while working on site. This includes explaining rules, best practices, and making sure everyone understands what's expected. Documentation. Finally, supervisors prepare reports and take photos to document inspections. This creates a record of what's been checked and helps track progress and compliance over time. So how can supervision be carried out? Supervision can be carried out in two main ways. First, the investor can use their own resources, relying on their own staff and human expertise. Second way, supervision can be outsourced to an external economic operator, usually through a public procurement contract. In that case, the arrangement is often based on established international contract standards, such as, for instance, FIDIC, NEC, or JCT. In the next slides, we'll share the most significant red flags to watch for when analyzing contracts and supervision in climate and environmental projects. From missing supervision clauses, vague or inconsistent reports, and mismatches with permits, to phantom subcontractors and absent on-site oversight. These are the warning signs that reveal irregularities and potential corruption schemes.
Remember, check the contract for supervision requirements. Always look at what the contract says about having a supervisor. Is supervision required? Under what conditions? This is the baseline for spotting irregularities. For example, in a flood protection project, the contract might say the supervisor must be present daily to check that the embankments are built to the right height. If the contract is vague or doesn't clearly define supervision duties, it leaves room for a manipulation. A missing clause about supervision is itself a red flag. Remember, use supervisor reports as an evidence. Supervisors write reports describing what has been done, how it was done, and what is happening on the site. These reports are a valuable source of knowledge about whether the contract is being properly implemented. For example, in a reforestation project, the supervisor's report should list how many trees were planted, where and whether they match the species required by the environmental permit. If the supervisor's report is vague, for example, trees planted as planned, or missing details, it's a red flag. Phantom planting, claiming trees were planted when they weren't. It's a common corruption scheme in climate and environmental projects. Remember, compare reports with contract obligations. Make sure the supervisor's reports match the requirements in the contract. If the reports show something different from what the contract demands, it may signal irregularities. For example, A contract for them requires eco-friendly concrete, certified to reduce carbon emissions. The supervisor's report mentions only concrete used, but doesn't confirm any certification. That mismatch suggests that the contractor may have used cheaper, not compliant materials. In environmental projects, this undermines sustainability goals and wastes climate funds. Remember, check consistency with construction and environmental permits or approvals. If a project requires building permit or environmental decision, the supervisor's report should match those conditions. Any gaps or contradictions can signal red flags. For example, imagine a project aimed at restoring a natural habitat. The environmental decision requires planting trees, only native species, and that should be also environmental supervision, and that for the first 6 months, those newly planted trees should be watered regularly. If the supervisor's reports don't show that this condition is being met, that's a red flag. Why it matters? Because if the watering requirement is ignored, the trees, the young plants, may not survive. The money will technically be spent, but the project will fail to deliver its intended results. In other words, compliance is just not a box to tick. It's a difference between success and wasted resources. Remember, spot patterns that suggest corruption schemes. Examples include subcontractors doing work that the main contractor was supposed to perform, or phantom subcontractors listed but not active, or supervision reports that omit key details. These are warning signs worth investigating. Let me give you an example. In a coastal protection project, a subcontractor is paid for soil testing, but no test results are ever included in the reports. That is a classic phantom subcontractor. Another example, in a waste management project, subcontractor is hired in a cascade manner. So there is one subcontractor that hires another and then another. The longer the chain, the harder it is to track responsibility, and it often hides inflated costs or kickbacks. And lastly, remember, during on-site check, verify that supervision is actually happening on the site. If the contract requires a supervisor, but none is present at the construction site, that's a major red flag. For example, a wind farm project says a supervisor should oversee turbine installation. When monitor checks the site, no supervisor is there. Without a proper oversight, corners can be cut, like using cheaper materials or skipping safety checks. In climate projects, this can mean that turbines don't withstand norms and will not be resistant to any storms or any other catastrophic weather events. And this might put communities at risk. By building awareness of corruption risks in climate and environmental projects, we can make public procurement more transparent and accountable. Thank you for your commitment and for taking the time to listen and learn with us today. Thank you.